Tardigrades are the most resilient animals in the universe, and there's probably one within a stone's throw from you right now.
I'm Danielle, and you're watching Animalogic.
Tardigrades are a phylum of microanimals that are found pretty much everywhere on the planet, from the depths of the ocean, to jungles, to rivers, to mud volcanoes. There are over 1,000 species of tardigrade distributed across 3 classes: Eutardigrada, Heterotardigrada, and Mesotardigrada. The main difference between the first two, Eutardigrada and Heterotardigrada, is that Eutardigrada have a single orifice for reproduction and digestion, while Heterotardigrada have separate ones. The third class, Mesotardigrada, has only been described by a single specimen, discovered in 1937. The specimen was lost in an earthquake, and no others have been found.
It's possible that this class doesn't exist.
Tardigrades were first discovered in 1773, and at the time were named water bears. This is due to the fact that they are normally found in fresh water, and their movements resemble the gait of a bear. The name tardigrade means slow stepper, which is in reference to their relatively slow movement speed.
Tardigrades are literally microscopic.
Depending on the species, they range in size from 0.1 to 1.5 millimeters in length. Their body has a head, 3 segments with a pair of legs on each, and a caudal segment, a tail, with another pair of legs. Their legs have no articulation and have 4 claws at the end made of chitin, the same material that makes up a crab's shell. They use their front 6 legs to grab things to propel themselves forward. Their rear pair of legs is used to grab onto the floor while they use their other 6 legs to nab food.
Adult tardigrades have a set amount of cells, and every member of the same species will have exactly the same number of cells.
This is called eutyly, and it mainly occurs in microscopic organisms. Baby tardigrades are born with a full number of cells, and rather than undergo cell division, they grow as their cells do. Tardigrades don't have any respiratory organs, and instead are able to do a gas exchange throughout their whole body.
Their mouth has stylets, which are like sharp little teeth.
They use these to pierce plants and small invertebrates, after which they feed on the leaked fluids. Most species of tardigrade have compound eye cups, and their bodies are lined with little hairs that help them feel vibrations. Tardigrades do have anal ducts, and some of them only do their business when they molt.
Another act that they save for molting is laying eggs.
After the female molts and lays eggs, the male will fertilize them. This mating process can last for over an hour.
But tardigrades aren't famous for their sex lives. They're famous for their ability to tolerate environments that would kill other animals in seconds.
This is primarily true for terrestrial tardigrades. Marine tardigrades aren't quite as resilient as their habitats are much more stable. In the most extreme of conditions, terrestrial tardigrades can mummify themselves into little shriveled glass tardies called tons, and in this state, they can withstand a whole heck of a lot.
Some species can survive at almost absolute zero, negative 273 degrees Celsius.
On the hot side of things, they can survive for extended periods of time in temperatures of over 150 degrees Celsius, far past the boiling point of water.
They aren't able to live in these extreme temperatures forever. The longer they stay, the lower their chances of survival.
They can live several days at minus 200 degrees Celsius and up to 30 years at minus 20 degrees Celsius.
During these extremely cold situations, they enter a state called cryobiosis.
In order to protect themselves from the expanding water inside their cells, they release cryoprotectants, which make the ice crystallize in a way that is less damaging to their cells.
Tardigrades can take a lot more than temperature, though.
Some species are able to withstand pressures that are 6 times higher than those encountered at the bottom of the Mariana Trench.
Which is about the same amount of pressure that we get to talk about bearded dragons on Animalogic.
Some species of tardigrade can survive inside a vacuum and have even survived in outer space, where they're exposed to both a vacuum and solar radiation, as they were in an experiment by the European Space Agency in 2007.
Even their DNA is resilient.
It can tolerate extreme amounts of radiation due to a protein called a damage suppressor that protects it. The protein reduces X-ray damage by 40%. Tardigrades can tolerate 1,000 times more radiation than most other animals.
If you received a dose of about 5 gray of radiation, you would die. A tardigrade, however, can withstand 5,000 gray.
Tardigrades can also survive air deprivation and will simply float around until they're in a spot where they can breathe again. Same goes for dehydration.
They can survive with just 3% of their water content, shriveling up to just a third of their size.
Similarly, some species of tardigrade can go without eating for 30 years, after which they dry out, become dormant, and then they can rehydrate, eat something, and carry on as if nothing had happened. It is rare for a tardigrade to go 30 years without food, but they fairly regularly will go for at least 5 years without eating.
People tend to call tardigrades extremophiles, but they're not.
An extremophile is an animal, usually a bacteria, that has adapted to live in an extreme environment. Tardigrades are just really good at living wherever they want, be it the Himalayas, in the depths of the ocean, or in your backyard.
Tardigrades have survived 5 mass extinctions, and unlike every other animal that we cover on this channel, they're well equipped to survive the next one.
Today, we're talking about organisms that show little or no signs of biological aging. These are the Immortals, and this is Negligible. We are a species obsessed with aging. We're constantly trying to battle the gray hair, wrinkles, and especially disease and mental and physical deterioration that comes with getting older. While it may be straightforward for us humans, on a scientific level, aging is extremely difficult to define and is far from universal. Dozens of theories for aging have been floated to explain it in evolutionary terms.
Certainly, the human race hasn't been here long enough to see a star go through its birth processes, its coming of age, its maturity, and its death.
Negligible senescence is a real mouthful, so let's break it down. Senescence is the trend on a cellular level, where individuals of a population increasingly experience disease and deterioration as they age, leading eventually to death. Negligible here means that the rate of disease and death in relation to age isn't statistically significant. What that means is that the risk of disease and death is stable, or in some organisms, even decreasing over time. Sometimes establishing senescence is difficult because it's hard to study long-living organisms in the wild. For example, we know that Galapagos tortoises are the longest living reptile. Their lifespans exceed a century in the wild and almost twice as long in captivity. But the jury is still out on if they actually age or not. So let's take a look at some of the enduring organisms whose status of negligible senescence is still under investigation. For that, we need to dive deep into the ocean to see the longest living vertebrate in the world, the record-breaking Greenland shark. Greenland sharks can live for hundreds and hundreds of years in the Arctic and subarctic. They're actually the only species to inhabit these icy waters year-round. One theory as to how these sharks can live so long is that they've adapted to the cold by slowing down their metabolism, which slows down all of their processes as well. Greenland sharks do everything slow. They grow a minuscule 1 centimeter a year. They swim just 3 kilometers an hour. They only reach sexual maturity after about a century. Their unhurried pace of life means that aging is slow too. Not much is known about the Greenland shark, as they're extremely tricky to observe in the wild. The first photograph of a Greenland shark wasn't even taken until 1995. Now that we're firmly deep under the sea, we've reached the depths of agelessness. Hydra vulgaris. These tiny palm tree-looking cnidaria measure just 1 to 3 centimeters in length and are 1 millimeter wide. They're also virtually immortal in lab environments. Every 20 days, this tiny everlasting invertebrate completely regenerates itself, thanks to its stem cells that are in a continuous state of renewal. From what we've seen, and we've been studying its eternal qualities since the mid-1700s, it doesn't age, and it doesn't die. If you cut pieces of a hydra off, it will simply regenerate. That's why it was named after the serpent in Greek mythology, where 2 heads grow back with every one that's chopped off. Even more impressive, if you scramble the cells of a hydra and squish them into a ball, the cells will rearrange and a new hydra will grow. The only things that kill a hydra in the wild are extreme weather events, disease, being gobbled up by predators, and Captain America. Recent studies have shown that they do slow down their asexual reproduction over time, which is a sign of aging, but research is ongoing. There is just one creature that one-ups the hydra in its avoidance of the slow march towards death, and that is the appropriately named Immortal jellyfish. This is the only species that we know of that can be called truly biologically immortal. This small jellyfish, which lives in waters all around the world, can actually reverse its aging process and revert to an earlier stage of its life cycle if it experiences stress or injury. Imagine being able to Benjamin Button yourself back to an embryo at the smallest inconvenience. This all just goes to show that the concept of senescence is as slippery as an immortal jellyfish. So let's take a look at some of the enduring organisms whose status of negligible senescence is still under investigation, like the ocean quahog, which can live to be at least 400 years old. One theory about how bivalve mollusks live so long is that they have high antioxidant capacity, which slows the aging process. Just take a look at any of the labels found on anti-aging products on the market today to see how us humans have tried to bottle that power.
While it may not be necessary for all of you, some girls use a lubricating cream or lotion to prevent skin roughness or chapping. Expensive creams and powders, however, aren't necessary. A healthy skin can be kept attractive with only a few simple preparations.
Rough-eye rockfish have also been recorded to live 140 years. We know this by measuring the rings of the small bones in their ears, called otoliths. Just like a tree's rings, the otolith gives researchers an exact read on just how old a fish is. Despite these potentially advanced ages, scientists are still trying to determine if rough-eye rockfish actually experience negligible senescence. Despite being the longest living arthropod, and what the memes say, American lobsters are not immortal, and they do experience senescence. They do, however, have the immortality enzyme, which is responsible for their long lives.
But now the lobster tries to get even. He demands cool, damp moss in which to live, and he refuses to live long if he doesn't get it.
This enzyme, called telomerase, is present in many lobster cells and allows the cells to keep dividing so that the lobster can keep growing and regenerating.
While the lobster is known as one of the world's greatest food delicacies, he is also famous for being just about the world's dumbest creature.
Human stem cells contain telomerase too. Lobsters grow throughout their lives, molding their shell and building a new one with each growth spurt. The theory is that this cycle costs the lobster a lot of energy. So, as they age, this growth and molding slows down until the cost becomes too high and the lobster dies of literal exhaustion. This happens to an estimated 10 to 15% of lobsters. The other 85 to 90% end up melted in butter.
He may be dumb, but as the main course for a delicious dinner, he's the tops.
Freshwater pearl mussels exhibit many characteristics that are typical for negligible senescence. They grow throughout their long lives, which can be over a century. They don't lose their ability to reproduce, and there are no noticeable differences between young and old individuals. The probability of pearl mussels dying does, however, increase with age. One study suggests that pearl mussels are an example of why negligible senescence isn't actually a thing. Our journey through immortality continues high up in the Rocky Mountains with the Great Basin bristlecone pine, the longest living non-colonial plant in the world. The oldest individuals that we know of are over 5,000 years old and show no signs of slowing down. Another everlasting tree is the quaking aspen, which, unlike the bristlecone pine, is a clonal colony tree. This means that all individuals in an aspen stand are genetically identical and just part of one huge underground root system. These aspen groves can live to be thousands and thousands of years old. Aspen are coated to survive. A thin layer of their bark photosynthesizes, so they can continue to grow even in winter, when all other deciduous trees have gone dormant for the season. Aspen can stand drought, fire, and basically anything you can throw at it, and only need one thing to survive: lots and lots of sunlight.
We know that green plant pigment, chlorophyll, is produced in plants only when they are exposed to sunlight. Keep a plant in the dark, and the leaves lose that rich green color. They become pale, and the plant slowly dies.
As the roots spread, they search for the best sunny spots, and once found, they'll spring up new trunks. Even if an individual tree is killed by a browsing animal, the other trees and the underground root system are unaffected. Losing a tree is like clipping a toenail. And if proper sunlight is blocked by other trees, the roots can lay in wait for a century or more until conditions improve. While individual trees only live about 150 years, one colony of aspen in Utah's Fish Lake National Forest is estimated to be 80,000 years old. Ginkgo biloba trees are also able to live for thousands of years, and when studied on a cellular level, show no signs of senescence. A study that compared a range of ginkgo trees, aging from 20 to 600, found no difference in their efficiency of seed germination, photosynthesis, nor disease resistance. The gene activity was the same, and the researchers couldn't find any evidence of programmed death. When ginkgos do die, it's usually from external factors like disease, storms, fire, and logging.
Behold! The greatest impersonator of the animal kingdom. This small cephalopod can be found in the shallow waters of the Indo-Pacific. Or maybe more accurately, it can't be found in the shallow waters of the Indo-Pacific. That's because it's often pretending to be something else entirely. This is the master of disguise, the mimic octopus. The mimic octopus is an underwater changeling with the power to seemingly transform into other species at a moment's notice. At just 60 centimeters maximum, the mimic octopus, officially known as Thaumoctopus mimicus, is quite demure compared to its largest cousin, the giant Pacific octopus, which can reach up to 4 meters across. Most octopus species share the ability to change their color, shape, and texture in the blink of an eye. In the case of the mimic octopus, they take it a little further, doing a complete quick change faster than you can say, "I'll have the octopus ceviche." Camouflage in nature is used to help prey avoid being eaten. In some cases, camouflage is also used by predators to get close to prey without being detected. This adaptation is a serious evolutionary flex. Camouflage tactics usually involve blending in seamlessly with the background. But for a creature as talented as a mimic octopus, the point of changing its appearance isn't to blend in. It's to stand out and scream, "Come at me, I dare ya!" Researchers have reported seeing these octopuses transform into everything from mantis shrimp and giant crabs to seahorses and starfish. But their preferred disguise is that of creatures that are packed with dangerous venom. This intimidating facade ensures that any predators floating by are fooled into thinking this otherwise delicious octopus is something that's definitely not on the menu. Like many adaptations, the mimic octopus got so good at mimicking because of its chosen habitat, in the open sandy shallows near river mouths. These areas are teeming with predators like large bony fishes, sea snakes, and sharks. To stay hidden, most of the time they'll either be peeking out of their burrows or camouflaging motionlessly with their surroundings. But as soon as they have to move, their cover is blown. That's when it becomes very important to pretend you're someone else. The octopus, for example, puts on a venomous disguise, dressing itself up as a lionfish. After matching the lionfish's distinct stripes, the octopus mimics its venomous spines by holding its flattened tentacles up around its body. Not many creatures have the blind courage to swallow a spiny and venomous lionfish, so this disguise works quite nicely as a warning to would-be predators. Here, the octopus raises its crimped tentacles to mimic a sand anemone, which packs a toxic sting. In order to sell the deception, the mimic octopus does more than just transform its appearance. It even adopts its target species' movements and behaviors. Hey, it might not fool you, but it certainly fools its predators. When it transforms into a venomous jellyfish, for example, the mimic will wave its tentacles the same way a jelly does, as it propels itself upwards through the water. Here, we see a mimic octopus transforming into a banded soul before our very eyes. By holding its arms flush against its flattened body, the octopus can easily pass for this poisonous fish. When in soul mode, the octopus glides across the bottom just like the fish to fully sell its clever disguise. Here, an octodaddy takes the shape of one of the world's most venomous snakes, the banded sea crate, to ward off potential predators. It achieves this threatening look by pulling 6 of its tentacles out of sight and stretching out the remaining 2 in opposite directions. It then, of course, dons the striking black and light gray stripes that are the hallmark of this highly venomous snake. Here is a mimic octo pretending to be a moray eel, a fish that packs a powerful bite and whose colors resemble those of venomous snakes. So this octo may actually be mimicking a non-venomous eel who itself is mimicking a venomous snake. Things can get very meta on the seafloor. If mimic octopuses weren't shape-shifty enough, they are often mistaken for their closely related but smaller cousin, Wonderpus photogenicus, otherwise known as the Wonderpus octopus. Admittedly, they do look quite similar, but there are a few small differences, most notably the long eye stalks of the Wonderpus, which give it an adorably cartoonish look. Both the Wonderpus and the Mimic have Oscar-worthy acting abilities, but even though the Wonderpus has more charisma, the Mimic seems to have more range, at least for what researchers have observed in the wild. Octopuses can color change thanks to specialized cells called chromatophores, located just below the surface of their skin. The center of each chromatophore cell contains a sac of pigment in colors like black, brown, orange, or yellow. To change color, each sac stretches or shrinks to give the right hue. Not only can octopuses change color, they can also change texture. Projections on the skin, called papillae, adjust to create textures ranging from smooth to bumpy. A true testament to their ability to hide in plain sight is the fact that mimic octopuses weren't even discovered until 1998. Our very limited experience with these incredible mimics means that we're just at the beginning of our understanding of what they can do. Right now, we don't even know for certain the extent of the mimicking capabilities of these octopuses. Scientists believe that we've only seen a fraction of the disguises these mimics can do. Who knows? Maybe your favorite YouTube show is run by mimic octopuses pretending to be nature documentary filmmakers.
Forget live fast, die young. This predator's motto is live slow, die ancient, all in the darkest depths of the Earth's coldest oceans. Living up to 500 years old, this is the oldest living animal on the planet. This is the Greenland shark.
Greenland sharks are old. They can live for 500 years, if not longer. This individual has been swimming the oceans since before the Mayflower arrived in North America.
This is the longest known lifespan of any vertebrate species.
If Greenland sharks can live up to 500 years, it means some of them were alive at the same time as Shakespeare.
The Greenland shark is also known as the Gurry shark or the gray shark. The Inuit people refer to it as Iqalusuaq. The species belongs to the sleeper shark family. The name comes from the slow swimming, low energy level, and generally non-aggressive nature.
These sharks are chill, and they like it cold.
You can find them in the North Atlantic Ocean and the Arctic Ocean. However, recent evidence suggests that at great depths, the species can be found as far south as the Caribbean. The Greenland shark has a short, rounded snout, small eyes, and very small fins. Their colors range from creamy gray to blackish brown. These sharks are huge. On average, they measure 2.5 to 5 meters long, which makes them around the same size as great whites. They typically weigh 1,500 to 2,200 pounds.
But there are unconfirmed reports of 7-meter-long Greenland sharks that weigh over 1,300 kilograms.
They tend to eat smaller sharks, eels, and any fish they can find. They're also scavengers. Smaller Greenland sharks predominantly eat squid, while bigger ones have been spotted hunting seals.
But sometimes their diet is random, and some Greenland sharks have been found with horses, reindeer, and polar bears in their stomachs. These unlucky animals probably fell through the ice, providing the sharks with an unexpected terrestrial treat.
Even though they're huge and terrifying looking, Greenland sharks are super slow and expend very little energy. In fact, the species has the slowest swim speed and tailbeat frequency for its size across all fish species.
Think of them as the sloths of the sea, if sloths had rows and rows of sharp-as-hell teeth. Actually, maybe don't think of that.
The Greenland shark usually swims at a mind-numbing speed of 1.2 kilometers an hour. At its fastest, it can get up to 2.6 kilometers an hour.
To put that in perspective, I could easily outswim a Greenland shark. Not that I could survive where they swim, of course. Unless you're Captain America between 1945 and 2011, you're probably not hanging out in the Arctic. And you're definitely not going swimming 2,200 meters underwater. This is likely why there's never been any recorded attacks of Greenland sharks on humans.
When the Greenland shark is ready to hunt, they play to their strengths and sneak up on animals that are sleeping. When you're this deep in the Arctic, stealth isn't all that hard.
The shark slowly approaches their prey, and when they're close enough, they open up their large buccal cavity to create a suction effect to suck them up. They often eat their prey whole.
The Greenland shark's metabolism is very slow, just like their swimming speed. Because of this, it doesn't need a ton of calories to survive.
Although they are apex predators, Greenland sharks are often blinded by parasitic crustaceans, a truly disturbing fate.
Luckily, their blindness doesn't seem to affect their survival or ability to find food. Living in the dark depths of the Arctic Ocean, eyesight isn't a must. Instead, the shark can rely on their sense of smell to find live prey and delicious, fragrant, yummy rotting carcasses.
Greenland sharks are usually solitary. Sometimes they get together to dine on a dead whale or other large carcasses, but generally they're quite solitary, until mating season, that is.
There is zero risk of teen pregnancy in the Greenland shark community because the species generally doesn't begin breeding until they're at least 150 years old.
No one has actually seen Greenland sharks mating, but females have been spotted with bite marks. This tells us that this species probably mates like other shark species. The male grabs the female with his teeth to hold her still while he fertilizes her eggs with one of his penises. Yep, they have two. Once the eggs are fertilized, they stay inside the mother's body. The gestation period can last up to 18 years. Can you imagine being pregnant for 18 years? And she can carry hundreds of pups at a time. That's a lot of years and a lot of babies.
Once they're born, they immediately leave their family for a life of solitude. The Greenland shark is considered a vulnerable species. There are tens of thousands of them left in the world, but every year, about 1,000 are deliberately caught by humans. Another 35,000 are caught as bycatch. People hunt the shark for its hide and to eat its flesh, even though it's toxic. It has to be treated before it's safely consumed. This is done by boiling it, drying it, or fermenting it for several months. In Iceland, it's called hákarl and is considered an Icelandic delicacy.
Chef Anthony Bourdain once described fermented shark as being the single worst, most disgusting, and terrible tasting thing he'd ever eaten.
I'm sure Greenland sharks appreciated Anthony's bad review. They'd rather be in the ocean than in your mouth.
Before we get into the amazing things jellyfish can do, we first need to understand what they are. For starters, they're not fish, nor jelly, as they're invertebrates, and the colloquial term jelly is more accurate, or at least less misleading. That being said, scientists go back and forth as to what a jelly is. The phylum Cnidaria has two types of body forms, the polyp and the medusa. The polyp is cylindrical, usually fixed in place, and represents the asexual stage. The medusa, on the other hand, is umbrella-shaped, usually free-swimming, and represents the sexual stage. Most of what people call jellyfish are medusa. Then there are the comb jellies, or Ctenophora, which are in their own phylum, meaning that they're only distantly related to medusa, but are still considered to be jellies. And then there's everyone's favorite, the Portuguese man-o'-war, or Phacelia phasalis, which is a cnidarian but not a jelly. It's what's called a colonial organism. It's made up of a bunch of different organisms that work together to survive. There are a few big differences between the two major classifications of jellies, Cnidaria and Ctenophora. First of all, there are way more discovered cnidarians than ctenophores. 10,000 versus 150. If you've ever seen a jelly, chances are it was a cnidarian. Ctenophores or comb jellies don't sting, but instead, some employ sticky tentacles or oral lobes to catch their prey. They also get around very differently. Regular jellies, or cnidaria, employ jet propulsion to move. They catch water under their bell and then they squeeze it out. This leads to a stop-and-go movement pattern, which you've probably seen if you've ever been to an aquarium or seen Finding Nemo. Comb jellies, however, use specialized comb plates to get around. Their bodies are lined with tightly packed cilia that beat in a wavy pattern that propels the jelly smoothly. Also, unlike comb jellies, cnidarian jellies have an incomplete digestive tract, meaning they only have one opening, which is both their mouth and their anus. Great! They are also super old. Jellies are believed to be the oldest living multi-organ creature in the world, having existed for more than 650 million years. Most medusa are made up of, depending on the species, 95 to 98% water. Their bodies are symmetrical, consisting of a large bell on top with tentacles and feeding arms coming out from the bottom. Their mouths are in the underside of their bell, and they use their arms to pull in plankton and other small prey. They don't have a brain, but instead have a web of nerve receptors throughout their bodies. They also don't have a respiratory system, as their skin is thin enough to oxygenate their bodies through diffusion. Some jellies even have eyes, but most employ light-sensitive organs called ocelli that they use to distinguish up from down. They range from tiny to huge, the smallest being around 1 millimeter long, and the longest being 36.5 meters, or 120 feet long. In the tentacles of a medusa, they have what's called nematocysts, which are basically microscopic hypodermic needles that inject their prey with venom. Depending on the species, they can have around 800,000 nematocysts per square centimeter, and it only takes them 10 milliseconds to sting. Many jellyfish can reproduce sexually and asexually, and most jellyfish are hermaphrodites, meaning they can either be male or female depending on need. They live all over the world, saltwater, freshwater, cold, tropical, shallow, and deep. And no matter where they are, they're totally amazing. The box jellyfish, Chironex fleckeri, is considered to be one of the, if not the, most venomous creatures in the ocean. Their sting is deadly to humans if not treated immediately. And if you do get treated, you'll have to live with the scars for the rest of your life. The Immortal jellyfish, or Turritopsis dornii, is my personal favorite. Called the Benjamin Button of the deep, this jelly can transform from adult to baby over and over again, essentially making it immortal. Instead of dying, over a period of 3 days, it turns into a blob-like cyst, and then develops into a polyp colony, the first stage of a jelly's life. The entire composition of the jelly is transformed in the process. Muscle cells can become nerve cells, or sperms, or eggs, or anything. They only activate the process when they're sick or injured, and they can still die when they're squashed or eaten. But still, So cool! Crespedicusta sewerbii is a Chinese freshwater jelly that has now become an invasive species throughout the world. They've even been found here in Canada, throughout our rivers and lakes, and in cottage country. But that's not the coolest lake jelly. That prize is held for the golden jelly, which can be found in Jellyfish Lake in Palau. A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, these jellies were isolated in the lake and are an excellent example of evolution. Since there's no plankton or similar prey to eat, they've developed a new way to eat: photosynthesis. That's right, inside the jellies are thousands of single-cell algae-like organisms called zooxanthellae that generate glucose via photosynthesis. This feeds their host, and the host jelly provides them with some of the generated energy in a symbiotic relationship. There's also a myth that they've lost their sting due to living in a predator-free lake. But in reality, their sting is just incredibly mild and virtually undetectable. The lion's mane jellyfish is usually called the largest jellyfish. It reportedly can, but not often, reach up to 120 feet in length, but that's mostly tentacle. Nomura's jellyfish, or Nemopilema nomurai, would be another good candidate, as they can weigh in at up to 450 pounds or 204 kilos. Comb jellies have a feature I didn't talk about earlier. They're virtually the disco parties of the sea. Their comb plates light up using bioluminescence and are simply mesmerizing. Some comb jellies use it for communication or self-defense. They'll light up to startle a predator that's closing in, and then they'll shoot out bioluminescent particles that diffuse their shape in the dark abyss, confusing their attacker and giving them a chance to flee. The not jelly, not fish Portuguese man-o'-war, or also known as the blue bottle jelly, is also pretty fascinating. Like I mentioned before, they're a colonial organism made up of different polyps that all serve specific purposes. They can't dive, but rather cruise the ocean with a gas-filled sail, catching prey just below the surface using long tentacles equipped with a deadly venom. The only things standing in their way are the few awesome creatures that have adapted to be immune to their venom and are now using it to wreak havoc across the ocean. And I could go on, believe me, but that's another video.
It's not a plant, it's not an animal, it's not a fungus either, though it has been known to act like one. It's not even a mold, despite its name. This creeping goo is older than the dinosaurs and is proof that you don't need a brain to be smart. These are slime molds. Today we're talking about the ooziest organisms of them all. No, I'm not talking about Slimer from Ghostbusters. I'm talking about ooey gooey slime mold. Slime mold is in a category all of its own, since it's not a plant, animal, or fungi. It's actually technically an amoeba that lives in the soil. Amoebas are any single-celled organisms that have the ability to crawl, but different amoeba species aren't necessarily super closely related to each other. Generally speaking, all amoebas, including slime molds, are enclosed by a cell wall and have at least one nucleus, which acts as the information center of the cell and controls and regulates its activity. These slimy amoebas can be found everywhere. There are around 1,000 known species, and they come in a huge range of colors. They live all over the world, but they prefer the warm and damp forest floor of the tropics, where they have access to rotting vegetation and can feed on bacteria, fungi, and yeast. There are, however, some species that thrive in arid deserts and the cold of Antarctica. Some slime molds have endearing nicknames, like living creepies, demon droppings, rotting mucus, and even dog vomit. I wonder what that last one looks like. Yeah, I don't know what I was expecting, but it's not good. No. Slime mold is a bit of a blanket term for a bunch of organisms that look and act similarly, but they can be separated into two broad categories: cellular and plasmodial. Cellular slime molds operate solo, but when they do encounter a food source, they'll put out signals to their friends and family to join the feast. These individuals will then form a mass and goo around as one, but each still remains a single cell. This type of cellular slime mold is almost always microscopic and can't be observed with the naked eye. Plasmodial slime molds, otherwise known as myzomycetes or true slime molds, can be seen with the naked eye and act very differently when they pile on. The most famous and well-studied of the true slime molds is the highlighter yellow Physarum polycephalum, which translates to many-headed slime. Like cellular slime molds, plasmodial slime molds turn into a pile of creeping goo, but in their case, when they form a mass, called a plasmodium or supercell, they become one single oozing unit. When these true slime molds band together, the cell walls between them disappear, and all of the nuclei operate as one. This mass is full of a system of veins, which are filled with a jelly-like substance called protoplasm. Wrapped around the veins are long strands of proteins which squeeze and relax, causing the protoplasm inside to pulsate forward. It's a system of locomotion that's utterly unique and definitely kind of unsettling. Unsurprisingly, the 1958 cult horror film, The Blob, was inspired by slime mold. Slime molds have receptors that give them a form of senses. They can smell if food is nearby and see by detecting light. They can even sense moisture and pH level. The direction of the slime mold's pulsing is in response to the signals these receptors are picking up. With Physarum polycephalum pulsating at about 1 centimeter per hour at room temperature, it can respond to these signals at an impressive pace. While slime molds don't have brains, they do exhibit pretty incredible behavioral intelligence. As far as a pile of goo goes, they can act much more intelligently than researchers ever expected. Several studies have shown that slime molds will consistently find the most efficient pathways between sources of food. One study famously placed oats, which slime molds go crazy for, by the way, in the same configuration of the major hubs of Tokyo, and the slime molds were able to almost exactly mimic the subway system. Japan's railway system, one of the most efficient in the world, was painstakingly created over decades by the best and brightest engineers, but the slime mold managed to accomplish the same efficiency in a single day. To arrive at their highly efficient routes, first, the slime mold fans out to explore its territory. Once it finds sources of food, it'll strengthen the most direct pathways between them and let less efficient routes dry up. If that's not smart enough for you, they've also been known to anticipate events. In another study, slime mold was exposed to unfavorable dry and cold conditions at regular intervals. In response, growth slowed during those periods. But before the next regular period of unfavorable conditions even began, the slime mold had already slowed its growth in anticipation of what was to come. It actually learned the pattern of these spells and took measures to protect itself before it was hit by the next wave of dry cold. I need you to know that where I come from, it's not uncommon to see people walking around in shorts in the snow. So you tell me, who sounds smarter? In yet another experiment, a small bridge was covered in salt with a yummy snack placed on the other side. Slime mold isn't harmed by salt, but it definitely doesn't like it. In a journey that would normally take an hour, the slime mold first needed 10 to reach the treat while navigating the salt. On each progressive day, however, the slime mold needed less and less time to cross the unpleasant salt to reach its snack. Within a few days, it was breezing over the salt in an hour, as if it wasn't even there. Pushing that experiment further, this first blob of slime was introduced to another that had no previous contact with salt. And within a few hours, even the new blob had learned to be okay with salt. So slime molds are capable of a kind of teaching and learning, which, if you ask me, is pretty damn smart. To germinate, similar to mushrooms, slime molds will sprout up fruiting bodies that throw spores. And these spores can travel. Genetically identical samples of slime mold have been found in both New Zealand and the US, meaning that the spores somehow managed to make it more than 14,000 kilometers to set up shop on another continent. The ability to travel so far and wide is also an extremely smart way to make sure you never run out of territory. So next time you have the urge to call someone a brainless amoeba, just know that you're actually complimenting their intelligence. This parasite is here to control the minds of its insect victims, with some species turning their hosts into real-life zombies. Once it's taken over, this fungus can turn a formerly dedicated member of the colony into an unwilling Trojan horse. These terrifying brainwashers are Cordyceps. Today we're talking about Cordyceps, a not-so-fun guy. At least not if you ask its helpless, mind-controlled victims. Cordyceps are a genus of over 500 parasitic fungi and can be found around the world, but are most predominant in warm, high-humidity climates in Asia. Their spores enter their victims, insects and arthropods, and set up shop immediately. If bugs could scream, it would be too late. Some species of Cordyceps use their power of mind control to turn their hosts into walking zombies hell-bent on doing their bidding. Nope, this isn't science fiction, it's science scary. But lucky for us humans, these type of mind controllers only prey on people in sci-fi movies and video games. Some of their closely related fungi cousins, the Ophiocordyceps, take it a step further. For Ophiocordyceps hosts, the relationship with their parasite couldn't be more toxic. As one species, Ophiocordyceps unilateralis, slowly takes over, it instructs the ant to act natural, tricking its colony mates into thinking everything's all right. That's the fungus equivalent of nothing to see here. Scientists notice that ants' brains are left mostly unaffected, but tissue around the body is often replaced by the fungus mycelia. This means that the fungus might actually not take over the mind, but rather the body of the ant, and forces it to move against the ant's will. They might not be making zombies, they're making live puppets. In turn, humans have been using cordyceps for medicinal purposes for ages. For thousands of years, cordyceps have been used in Chinese and Tibetan traditional medicine. Ophiocordyceps sinensis, for example, is a medicinal species that sprouts exclusively from the head of ghost moth caterpillars and is only found at high altitudes in the Qinghai Tibetan Plateau. Because of its rarity, it's prized as one of the most valuable ingredients in these medicinal traditions. Instead of zombies, this cordyceps took a page from a different horror novel and turns its victims into mummies. The resulting fungi host complex is then used for a variety of ailments like asthma and respiratory inflammation. Overharvesting of this species has put it on the endangered species list in China. Ophiocordyceps militaris, which is much easier to grow commercially, is often used as a cheaper alternative. One thing's for sure, mind control is not one of the side effects of cordyceps. At least not outside of science fiction. Humans are also finding ways to put cordyceps to good use outside of medicine. Currently, cordyceps are being investigated as eco-friendly pest killers for a variety of invasive baddies. So in a way, cordyceps are basically Dexter. Citrus crops, for example, are attacked by citrus leaf miners. While these pests have traditionally been effectively managed with the application of synthetic insecticides, the flip side is that these same chemicals have a big negative impact on predators and other insects. A lack of predators means it's basically open season for other harmful pests to come to the citrus feast. Introducing Cordyceps javanica, which parasitizes leaf miners, to the citrus battlefield, is one way researchers are combating these pests naturally. In the fight against coconut root grub, which attacked the roots of coconut and other crops, spraying the ground with insecticides isn't a healthy option for anyone. So scientists are investigating species like Cordyceps militaris that naturally prey on these grubs to control their populations. From parasitic killer to medicinal healer, cordyceps really do have so many layers. But are they layers of a parfait or layers of an onion? I'll let you be the judge. They may look dead, but there is still life within these leaves. Years of drought may plague them, but nothing can stop these plants from rising again. These comeback kids may even teach us how to make the plants we eat more resistant to drought. These are the resurrection plants. Today we're talking about desiccation-resistant plants that just don't quit. Resurrection plants are anhydrobiotic, meaning they have the ability to come back to life after weeks, months, or even years of dehydration. The most basic aspect of plant care is that plants need water. If you have plants at home, even succulents, air plants, and other species that require little water, you know that forgetting to give them a drink for too long could spell death for your plant babies. And plants are thirsty. Depending on the species, most plants will die if they lose more than 15% of their relative water content. In the case of the roughly 100 resurrection plants that exist, they can tolerate losing up to 97% of their relative water content and live to see another day or even decade. When they do find water again, they come back fast and furious, rehydrating to their old selves in just a matter of hours. But how do resurrection plants return from the brink of dehydration when other plants would have dried up and died long ago? When faced with drought, resurrection plants enter a state called anhydrobiosis. In this state, there is almost no water within their cells, and their metabolic activity all but stops. To survive, they have to be able to not only maintain their physiological integrity, but they also have to cap the damage caused by desiccation, a fancy way of saying the removal of water, and repair damage that was suffered when water becomes available again. Xerophyta humilis ranges from southern Ethiopia to Namibia and is a Poikila chlorophyllus type of resurrection plant. Desiccation-tolerant plants are divided into two types: homoiochlorophyllus, those that maintain their chlorophyll when dried out, and poikilochlorophyllus, those that lose it. Chlorophyll is the pigment that makes plants green and aids with photosynthesis, the process that plants use to turn sunlight into energy. Losing its chlorophyll is a strategy Xerophyta humilis evolved so that it doesn't waste energy maintaining its photosynthetic system during periods of desiccation. It also means that it has to resynthesize chlorophyll when it rehydrates. To keep stable during dry periods, organs inside the Xerophyta humilis cells, which are normally filled with water, are replaced with smaller organs filled with substances like sugars or acids. This prevents the cells from collapsing when it dries out, allowing the plant to rise again. Let's move on to the most iconic of resurrection plants, the spike moss Salaginella lepidophylla, also known as the false rose of Jericho. Originating from the Chihuahuan Desert of Mexico and the US, this plant definitely needs to be desiccation tolerant to survive on its home turf. False rose of Jericho is not to be confused with the true rose of Jericho, Anastatica hyrochuntica, which is a tumbleweed native to Western Asia and not part of our exclusive Resurrection Plant Club. While the genus Salaginella contains about 700 species, only 3 of these have evolved to become desiccation resistant. When subjected to extreme aridity, this plant curls itself up into a tight ball as its leaves dry out and become brown. The outer leaves curl in pretty quickly, shading the inner part of the plant, while the inner leaves take it slow as the plant dries out. Then, its metabolic functions essentially stop completely. If the drought lasts long enough, the roots of the false rose of Jericho disconnect, and it will blow away in the wind similar to a tumbleweed, until it encounters moisture, unfolds, and takes root in the new location. False roses of Jericho don't have seeds. Instead, they reproduce with spores, like ferns do. Next on our list of plants with sequels, Haeberlia rhodopensis, also known as the Orpheus flower. This plant is native to the mountains of central and southern Bulgaria and northern Greece. This unflappable flower is named after Orpheus, a musical superhuman hero from ancient Greek mythology who was torn apart by the women of Thrace. Even after he was ripped to pieces, his head kept on singing as it floated down the river it was thrown into. It's that never give up in the face of decapitation attitude that inspired this plant's common name. Growing at elevations between 600 and 1700 meters, these rare jewels can be found nestled in limestone crevices. Orpheus flowers can lose up to 90% of their relative water content and still survive, although not without a few battle scars. Such extreme desiccation takes its toll on the outside leaves, but the inner crown will regenerate and new leaves will grow when moisture levels return. Our next plant is a resurrection fern, otherwise known as Pleopeltis polypodioides, native to southern North America and Central America. The resurrection fern is an epiphyte, which is commonly called an air plant, meaning that it lives its life attached to another plant for support. These plants get their moisture and nutrients from the air, not from the host, like in the case of parasitic plants. I like to think of resurrection ferns as a ride or die to their tree FFs. When they get dried out, the fronds of the resurrection fern curl up and turn gray-brown, giving it the appearance of being long dead. It can tolerate losing up to 97% of its water, and, according to scientific estimates, it could remain in this death-like condition for over a century. The second it's exposed to even a small amount of moisture, new life is breathed into the fronds, and it quickly returns to its former green and luscious state. The resurrection fern is a true sleeping beauty, if Sleeping Beauty were a shriveled pile of brown leaves. The resurrection fern holds the title for being the first fern in space when it was taken aboard the Space Shuttle Discovery in 1997 to be studied. The result? Pleopeltis polypodioides is just as efficient at returning from the brink of death, even while barreling around the Earth in zero gravity at 28,000 kilometers an hour. So I guess you could call the resurrection fern the first space zombie. Scientists are still trying to understand the how and why behind desiccation tolerance in resurrection plants. By studying their natural protection mechanisms, we can learn how to make crops more resistant to drought. By targeting genetic modifications, we could hack how other plants respond to extreme aridity. This would be especially important for food production in arid areas of the world, where certain crops may not be able to handle the extremely dry climate. In a climate-changing world where hotter, drier conditions are on the horizon, this type of research may even be crucial for our future. Even though it seems they can live into eternity, resurrection plants can't stay in their desiccated state forever. Eventually, if they don't find water, even this mega-resilient plant will shrivel and die. There's a metaphor for love and connection in here somewhere, I am sure of it. So what should we talk about next? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for new episodes every week. Peace. This utterly unique plant may look dead, but some individuals have been alive since before the foundation of Sparta.
This is Sparta!
While this octopus-like pile of dried-out leaves may not be the world's prettiest plant, it's certainly one of the most peculiar. This is Welwitschia. Today we're talking about one of the oldest plants in the world. This one looks like it's definitely seen some things. It's not easy on the eyes, but that's okay, because today we're going to be looking at the inner beauty of the Welwitschia. Welwitschia mirabilis is endemic to the arid and semi-arid regions of western Namibia and Angola. It's the only species in its genus, Welwitschia. The English name for this ancient plant comes from the first European to describe it back in 1859, Austrian botanist Friedrich Welwitsch, but it's more commonly known as tree tumbo. Carbon dating has revealed that some specimens of Welwitschia are upwards of 3,000 years old. To give some context, that's 1,000 years before the ancient city of Petra in Jordan was built. And around the time the first colossal stone heads were carved by the ancient Olmec civilization in what is today Mexico. They were sprouting just at the beginning of the Zhou dynasty, the longest-running dynasty in Chinese history, which lasted 790 years. These plants were already 300 years old when Homer's Odyssey was written. I told you, these guys have seen some things. Welwitschia range in diameter from 60 to 120 centimeters, but only grow upwards about 30 centimeters off the ground. Their claim to fame is that they've got the longest living leaves of any in the plant kingdom. These leaves grow continuously throughout their lives in 2 ultra-long leathery bands. That's right, that cluster of leaves that make up the Welwitschia are just 2 individual leaves. At their rate of growth, a single leaf can grow 150 meters in 1,000 years. The fresh green part of the leaf stays about 3 meters long. As it grows, the ends wither slowly, leaving a long trailing section of dead leaf still attached. The desert winds whip the leaves, causing them to split into ribbons, making this plant look like a dried-up desert octopus. These octo-like leaves grow from the large woody stem, which is mostly subterranean. Welwitschia is a phreatophyte, meaning it has very deep roots that allow it to access moisture deep below the surface. The taproots of the Welwitschia are said to look like giant radishes. While Welwitschia can live for an obscene amount of time, it can be a challenge for them to reproduce. And seeing a juvenile Welwitschia flopping around in the wind is rare for a couple of reasons. First, a fungus commonly infects the seeds, which affects their viability. It spreads through its namesake, the Welwitschia bug, a local species known to swarm the plant for its nectar. The bug spreads fungus, but it's also thought to be one of the plant's main pollinators. The second reason is that seedlings need more than 55 millimeters of rain to germinate, which doesn't happen very often in the Namib Desert, where it only averages 40 millimeters of rainfall a year. As a result, groups of Welwitschia that sprouted from the same germination event over the millennia can be found clustered together. Welwitschia don't live more than about 100 kilometers from the coast, in what is known as a fog belt. The fog is created when the hot Namib Desert air meets the cold current from the Atlantic Ocean. The condensation from the fog collects on the leaves, which are the perfect shape to direct the moisture down to the roots. During times of drought, zebras and other animals will chew on the plant for moisture. Luckily, the weird and wonderful Welwitschia isn't bothered at all. It just keeps on growing. How Welwitschia has managed to survive in the desert is still up for debate, since it appears to be hardly thriving in its bone-dry home in both numbers and appearance. Some evidence suggests that this plant wasn't always a desert dweller. One study hypothesizes that proto-Welwitschia, which existed as far back as the Cretaceous period, 66 million years ago, grew in zones with much more well-balanced moisture. This was long before the tectonic plates drastically changed the landscape of today's Africa, and even before an asteroid killed all the dinosaurs. Evolving in a wetter environment would explain why they need such high levels of moisture to germinate, and why they look so lush when grown in greenhouse conditions, and so dead-looking where they live now.
But despite all odds and across thousands of years, this survivor is still holding it down and still captivating us with its tenacity. There's some kind of deep, meaningful life lesson hiding in that heap of brown, dead leaves. Don't you think?
Tardigrades are the most resilient animals in the universe, and there's probably one within a stone's throw from you right now.
I'm Danielle, and you're watching Animalogic.
Tardigrades are a phylum of microanimals that are found pretty much everywhere on the planet, from the depths of the ocean to jungles to rivers to mud volcanoes. There are over 1,000